Hey everyone, and welcome to the Best of 3 Call of Duty Esports podcast. I'm your host, Josh. SalvationsElite to my right is Bash_Bo3 Sam, and to our farthest right, not per usual, is none other than IHOLDSHIFT. We have ShadyNero's unfortunately MIA today.
Unfortunately, he got married.
Unfortunately, he got married. So big shout out to Rex for locking one down, baby. Things you love to see. And
we never thought possible. Good job, dude.
I know, right? And he'll be back at it again, hopefully next week. We'll see what happens.
Him.
And it's going to be a wild time. But man, we have a lot to talk about today. Obviously, today we're doing the biggest weaknesses for every CDL roster. With Rostermania starting to slow down a little bit, a better idea of some of these teams, the announcements. We're going to be going through all of that. And we're going through the news of the week, obviously with the Mutineers announcing and some retirements and a lot more today, not to mention some intelligent irrelevance, some quick questions. This is going to be a spicy one. But boys, I mean, this is what we've all been waiting for. I got to ask, what's going on?
Well, Josh, I'll tell you. Guy, you asked me to come on this podcast today, and I feel like I have been transported to the loading bay of a spaceship that's completely broken.
Oh.
And on this spaceship, there is a multitude of other people around me.
Of course.
Don't know who they are. I can't communicate with them. They're just completely mute and they're just going about their business.
Mm-hmm.
Wiring things, fixing up control panels, turning on and off lights. It's crazy. But what's this? You might be wondering. I've got a knife in my back pocket.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm going around and I realize, would you look at that? I am skinny enough to fit in that small ventilation shaft. I'm going to get into that vent and I'm going to start wrecking havoc.
Oh, no.
You want to know why? Because I'm a freaking imposter right now. That's why.
Oh, baby, he's an imposter.
That was an impressive.
Oh, my goodness. What a freaking work. That was actually insane. I mean, that's as good as it gets. I mean, that may as well have been Rex ShadyNero.
I should have.
couldn't.
The thing was, too, is that was an impressive, that was an impressive description. I didn't even.
I mean, you just molded it.
Imposter.
It's seamless. I mean, yeah. It's as seamless as it gets.
I was listening to your guys' podcast yesterday, and every time I hear that, well, Josh, it makes, I lose it. I lose it every time. So shout out to Rex. Congratulations on getting married. Congratulations, buddy.
Things we love to see.
That
Absolutely.
was a win. That was a big W.
Yeah,
right there.
yeah, that's a big W right there. That's as relevant as it gets. I mean, this is, that's not the segment, but it's as relevant as it gets. Let's go, boys. It's as intelligent as it gets. But like I said, we have a lot to get into today, obviously. You can listen on Apple Podcasts. You can listen on Spotify. You can watch on YouTube. You can drop a comment down on YouTube, and you can drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And Sam, is there by any chance that you have the reviews pulled up?
You know, it's kind of funny. You think by this point, I would be ready for this. But in this 96th episode, I think we're on, I still am not prepared. So
95th.
let me just, 95th.
Which is actually exciting. We're 5 off 100. So actually,
very impressive.
While we're here, drop your ideas down below for our 100th episode. We want to do something kind of fun for it. So
here we go.
Throw any ideas you got.
I've got a fun one here. This one, 5-star, of course, from Obey Samuel 1. So already, great name.
Love that guy. I love that guy.
Don't know if I can get behind that.
Title, Love, 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 this podcast. That's 3 loves, folks.
A lot of love.
Hey guys, I'm back with another review. Great job. Man, draws unattached are highly ranked. I mean,
yeah.
You guys had draws unattached pretty high.
I think both are low B to high C tier.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's shady.
I mean, Draza, yeah.
Okay.
What?
Jeez. Despite Draza's impact, thieves were still average with and without him. Now, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but sure. Attach was consistent, but same with him. Rokkr was up and then low and then disappeared. A bit of a hot take. Insight should be top of B tier. I think Crim6 should be A and Clayster.
Holy hot takes.
Yeah. Salvation should know this comparison of Brady and Mac Jones. Having the older leader with experience is better than a player that pops for one season.
Brady? Brady's a Hall of Fame god.
That's a pretty good reference. I'm not going to lie, though.
Brady being Crim and Insight being Mac Jones. Who do you want? Insight showed, but did he show the consistency at the end of the year when everything was shown? I mean,
I would say more like Insight's Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he was rookie of the year, literally a top 10 player on the year, undoubtedly. Like, top 5 for a lot of people. I mean, I would say he's more of like a Patrick Mahomes type than like Mac Jones. But,
Agreed.
And then last few
Hearsay.
things here. Have a problem? Invite me to the podcast. So that is a straight
dang
up.
it. You just barely missed it.
Straight up mic drop there. Love from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Maybe
Shout out to my hometown of Parral, Chihuahua.
Oh, shout out.
Is that? I hope I said that right.
Maybe that was Shift's review and that's why he's here. Are you Obey Sam?
No, I'm not Obey Sam. I would not be caught with those hotness of takes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
fair.
okay. Okay, I will just one like quick side thing. I did reply to a tweet here about Draza. I'll be first to admit I am obviously a little high on him, but
Yeah.
I think this is where I'll start and go with it and stop. Is with how crazy of a year Thieves had with roster change. I guess I put it as a huge bright spot for Draza to be like the most
At least
impactful,
solid throughout all of
player.
that.
And I think I'm giving him higher than maybe he should be is because of what I think his potential could be and could have been if he was on the roster the whole year.
Same could be said when he was playing for Optic Gaming LA, dude. Your takes are never blasted.
Bro,
right, Sam?
Shift, you're the best.
They're always
Can you
perfect.
just always be here.
What is happening here?
Constantly. If you ever need me, you know where to find me.
I mean,
I'll just call you up.
Well, and that's why like last week I was so shocked that because I thought we were all high on Draza, which I mean, you guys were very high on Draza. We had talked about him quite a bit on the show, but like, I just didn't realize that you had him like locked into like a pretty top of the A tier versus like a top of the B tier type. I had him more as a top of the B tier guy, as like a really important contributing player to a team with high upside heading into Vanguard.
Yeah. I suppose it's more like, you know what? I had to have one real spicy take. Let's do it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, oh no, fire away.
I come from a place of bias as well because I watched him go from AR to sub to
That's
AR
true.
to sub in Modern Warfare, and he slayed the entire time, both in Europe and in North America when Singularity came over. So
yeah.
For Insight in particular, I think that he's definitely up there. Draza as well, same conversation point. He's unreal.
Well, I mean, like Insight's performances in the AMC last year were nuts. Some of them were crazy.
Yeah.
And like then he translates it immediately to the Pro League. So we'll see. But yeah, the comments on last week's episode are actually really, really interesting considering like some people were all in on the Draza side. Some people were like all off the Draza side.
That sounds about right.
The comments were probably the spiciest ones we've ever had on an episode, which is honest, the territory of tier lists.
I stayed away because I knew that I was going to get roasted, so I stayed away from the comments.
It wasn't too bad, all things considered, but it was definitely a good one. So, well, today we actually have a quick question. Our quick question today is, and maybe this could be that guy, who knows? Who will be the next player who hasn't won champs to win champs? Is there a guy that comes to mind who's going to be the next first to win champs? And there's obviously a lot of those teams that, those guys, some of the favorites out here. But I guess it kind of comes down to, do you think FaZe is going to go back to back? Like what does that look like? And, how could that play out? So who's the first player that comes to mind for you, Shift?
Cammy. So back in Modern Warfare, and I've said this on this podcast a couple times now, but I said it all the time, Modern Warfare. You get Cammy some help, that guy's going to win championships.
Yeah.
Toronto got him some help. They started to win majors.
And they were right there. There.
Yep. It doesn't matter what the rest of that supporting cast looks like. I mean, you could say, obviously, for that, you would also have Bance and Kleenex and Insight that would all win championships for the first time. But I think if you were to pick one particular player, let's say that for some reason Toronto starts to tank and someone's like, yo, Cammy's valuable, let's go buy him.
Yeah.
Cammy's that guy.
I could see that. Yeah. I mean, like you said, that would be kind of the thought is like, even if FaZe were to win this year, going into next year, Cammy would probably still have a really, really good chance, even if he's not on the Ultra. So like that would come out that way. I like that one. Sam, what do you have?
Yeah, I like for sure. I was going to say, you could say any of the Ultra guys because like if you're going to assume that they were, going to stick together.
Yeah, odds wise.
But I do like that take,
for sure.
With like Cammy, if like something like some implosion happened on that team where, they're still seeing second places every single tournament, that kind of thing. But in terms of, maybe if I try to step out a little bit, maybe Hydra. He's
Neptune.
I
for sure
like that call.
He's bound to be a huge impact anywhere he goes. Just a matter if he can find the right team around him.
And New York's set up to be good this year. I would probably have gone that route too.
Mm-hmm.
So would you guys say Hydra wins a ring first or Standy wins a ring first?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point too.
Well, that's interesting because I mean, like heading into this year, I would imagine like I would definitely favor New York. Like right now, like assuming the roster is going to be Neptune, Hydra, Crim, and Clay over the Rokkr, just because of the upside of the SMG duo is insane with Neptune and Hydra together. The potential there is crazy, but you know, there's a world where it could also crash and burn where they don't have the AR slaying they need or like the flex. You know, the elite flex. It depends how Crim plays this year. You know, there's a lot of variables there too. You know, that'd be my initial instinct. There would be like definitely Hydra. I mean, like my goodness, he is so good. And if they don't win this year, you know, next year. Whatever happens with that roster, you'd imagine Hydra's going to land on a pretty good team either way, and then suddenly he probably has a good chance to win again. So I would go Hydra's route. Otherwise, I would be totally fine with saying like one of the LAT guys, like a Draza or like a Envoy, you know, like a something like that to win their first champs. Well, I guess any of them, but
any of them,
you know, who knows? But I like all those options. So
yeah,
that was a fun quick question.
Good question.
But
like that.
With that said, I think we can get ourselves into the news of the week. So without further ado, let's hit it.
The Call of Duty News of the Week.
Oh, baby. News of the week. We have no Rex to give us our news here, but you know, we'll stick with this for now. We're going to start off hot. I mean, the Mutineers announced their roster. I mean, it was nothing shocking as the roster we all assumed they were going to be announcing, but they were bringing the boys back. We're getting SMG Wake, and we're getting another rookie debut. We're getting Dave Patty in the CDL. So we got Skies, Awakening, Havoc's back, and Dave Patty as a squad of 4 with Yeez as the sub. And in their announcement video, they said Yeez is the substitute for now, is what they said in the announcement video. So we'll see what happens with this team. But Shift, I want to hear your thoughts right off the rip.
You gave me a perfect segue because you hit me with that Yeez for now is the substitute. That is almost like already saying we might be making a move very early on.
Or before the year starts.
Or even before. Hell, that very well could happen.
Yeah.
Like, you got to think that there's going to be a lot of negotiation on what happens with that starting roster as the game drops and as they're playing scrims. I would not be surprised if Havoc and Yeez are almost splitting 50-50 time. Or if it's maybe a 3-man rotation type thing where it's, you know, I don't know. This is a weird roster, man.
Because they have multiple different, they could go different ways with it. I mean, like,
they
what
really could.
If Dave doesn't work out? And then suddenly now Yeez is in, and then you move
Wake goes back to AR.
And now you have Havoc and Yeez on SMGs, and you're rocking with that roster. So like, this could go a lot of different ways.
And I kind of like it in that regard. Yeah. As far as overall initiative strength goes, I'm not a big fan of what this roster looks like. Love Dave, glad he's in the league, deserves to be in the league.
Agreed.
Did I love watching Wake run an SMG back at Modern Warfare? Not really. It was not super hot on
him on the AR for sure.
Absolutely. Because that you got to remember that Florida team back then was going through like major identity crisis when Mox was a part of it. So it almost feels like we were going to go in that cycle almost again. But I think as far as having potential upside, you've got 2 very good rookies in Yeez and Dave that are kind of like insurance policies in their own right, where it's like, okay, Havoc doesn't work out. Let's put Yeez in, give him a try. Or wait a second, Dave doesn't work out. All right, cool. Yeez can still come in and you can make the AR swap or whatever it happens to be. I think there's a lot of flexibility, but it definitely was surprising, I think, to see that this was the way that they're going to take this next year.
Yeah, I agree. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm very curious, like you both said, with how Wake and Havoc are in a duo. You know, like you said, Shift, seeing Wake on SMG last year wasn't like the greatest, or in Modern Warfare, I should say. You know, wasn't anything crazy exciting, but you know, who knows? Maybe the change to 4v4 might help him with like map placement better, that kind of thing. But
that's true. You can play a little bit slower in that 4v4 as an SMG role, you know, like that, and that's what Wake I'm sure would want to do probably. So definitely,
but yeah, you know, I know me and Rex have mentioned too, like seeing like Skies and Wake as an AR duo was sometimes weird, and like it's not a problem of talent for sure. But it looking on the bright side, maybe this could be like a positive change where, okay, this gives Skies maybe more of a like main AR focus here, and then like kind of allowing him to do maybe more of his thing. I don't know. I'm just trying to find
I agree
the
with you though,
here.
because like Neptune. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw like the little Neptune clip of him talking about Awakening, but like he said like talking about basically said playing with Awakening is kind of weird because sometimes it feels like he's a one man army and he goes a little rogue sometimes, and he can kind of lose the teamwork once in a while. And Yeez and him, or I mean him and Neptune kind of like we're chill about it, but like. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting hearing that from Neptune's perspective as an SMG and like feeling like sometimes the AR wasn't there for him when you need him on the map. And so maybe that could be a problem. But like we all know how freaking talented Awakening is as just naturally around the map. So that's why it's hard to kind of figure out exactly how the team's going to play out before we see them in scrims or even know who their starters are even going to be at this point.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really big shout. And Dave definitely showcased throughout the majority of the Challengers years, take away the first 4 cups because they were kind of whatever. I mean, he had a couple of top 32 finishes while he was finishing or finding a team to play with, but the vast majority of his year was spent with top 4 finishes. So, I mean, he definitely knows how to compete. And I would say as kind of more of a, that kind of, I won't say he's a flex AR because we don't see him run sub ever, but, if there were to be like a no scoped, no stocked M4 like there was in Modern Warfare, you would assume that he could pull that style out and do fine with it, where Skies would obviously run main anchor at that point in time. So I know that there's a lot of conversation in the ARs that we saw in Vanguard that like, wait a second, you might be able to get the STG as main, but there are some other options right now that are being looked at as far as potentially getting a little bit up close and a little bit grittier.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with this roster. It does give him some like flexibility with what ends up being the metas at the beginning of the season. Like my thought would be like, and we also saw the AM scene. A lot of the AMs kind of got a little mad when the news originally came out that Dave might be the guy that Florida was picking up. There was quite a lot of rumbles in like the AM scene about that versus some other guys. But I mean, for you guys who are listening out there, like, who even is Dave Patty? Like he last year he was on Triumph basically throughout most of the season with that Standy fellow royalty Nagafen squad, and they had a ton of success during that time throughout the middle of the season. And then this year he was on, at least through the second half of the year, was on that Team Canada squad with Royalty Exotic and Diamond Con, and then with fellow at the North American Finals replaced Diamond Con. So overall, we've seen a lot of really promising play from him, and I'm pretty excited about him overall to see how he plays in the CDL.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to see moving forward and what happens there, but we'll definitely talk more about them in our little segment later in this episode. So be on the lookout for that, of course. So heading on with same news there. Obviously, nothing shocking though. Mutineers announced also their departure with Neptune. Shocker. We all knew that was coming with him potentially, or almost for sure guaranteed going to New York at this point. So that's something to consider. And we already talked about the whole Neptune and Awakening thing. So the next big piece of news was Loony. I mean, obviously, he recently announced his retirement, but now he's finally got his next step, and he's going to be one of the head coaches, assistant coach for the Rokkr now with Saint, and joining that squad as a coaching staff. So thoughts on Loony as a coach?
That's super exciting. I think we probably multiple times said that like Loony deserves to be somehow either a coach, an analyst, or something. Because I mean, I think no one here denies like how smart Loony is. And
he's just a good guy. Like he's easy to get along with. He's I feel like he could be a great manager. Definitely.
So I do hope he does have a lot to like say and like a lot of I guess pull when it comes to the Rokkr. Hopefully, definitely, he doesn't get sidelined or anything. Because I do think he should be like the main coach. Honestly, nothing against Saint, but when Loony's had success in the pro league and he's a fantastic player and just overall probably smart. So I think this is a huge thing for Rokkr, and what could maybe push him more over the edge. Like we've seen Rokkr, they're right there.
Yeah.
Like the talent's there.
That's true.
So maybe that's what they need, and that's a pretty cool thing for Rokkr to do, and it's cool. It's cool to see that they are like willing to like invest more in that too. So
I agree. That's exciting for sure.
I was going to say the exact same thing. This might be what gets them over that hurdle. To be a consistent top 3 grand finalists showcase. That's the big thing overall is that we see teams like Toronto. They started kind of making those moves through Modern Warfare, especially in the beginning of Cold War. But Minnesota has obviously been able to do the same with their major roster change between Modern Warfare and Cold War. And then also bringing up, in kind of switching around rosters, bringing in, new talent like Standy. I think this is a very, very heads up move for Minnesota just to kind of ensure consistency going on in the future, because if things don't work out with the roster they have right now, which I'm sure will be talked about later, you've got two now very smart minds of what they're watching. I think that's the big thing is maybe outside of like Nubsy, Saint was probably the most active CDL coach when it came to supporting and watching challengers. So
and that paid off big time.
Yep, you get that again. It just gives you that extra little bit of a depth to where if you need to make moves, you could, because right now there's no substitute for Minnesota, technically speaking. So there would be potentially room for them to maybe do like what Atlanta did with Sib and just bring in someone on contract just to have them just in case.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like literally the ideal situation. Like they have to sign somebody at some point, and so hopefully that's how that plays out for them. They take a chance on another guy, and then they have options right away. So that'd be awesome. I mean, like for Loony, I think it's really cool because it's kind of like, it feels like kind of a stepping stone. Like, okay, first job's kind of like the assistant coach situation to get the ropes down and feel like what it takes. And Saint obviously knows what he's doing. He's had a lot of success in the coaching realm, coaching some very, very good teams since BO4, obviously. Yeah. And I think Loony being there is great for Loony. It's great for the Rokkr and makes a ton of sense. And he's just such a good vibes guy too. Like, who doesn't want to have Loony around? Like, that's fantastic. So like, I don't think it could be much better of a signing. Like, and I agree with you. It's like a perfect situation. I think he can only bring value to the team. So I'm excited, man. That was awesome for the Rokkr. Like, if you're a Rokkr fan, you got to be hyped about that, to say the least. So
definitely,
I'm loving it. And we will definitely talk about them more in this episode as well. Ooh. So moving on. This is sad, man. Apathy hung up the sticks, man. And I mean, donk mode is retired, and that sucks. That sucks because
it does.
I mean, he's a legend in the scene, one of the best players of all time, and he's going into full-time content. He announced that he signed with LAG now as a content creator, which we'd already talked about a little bit, was rumored to be happening the last few weeks, and so it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, my goodness, Apathy is the GOAT. Thoughts on App?
Yeah. Major congratulations on his storied career. Is first and foremost where we have to start that conversation. But honestly, this is probably the best move he can make. As much as I'm sure it sucks to be putting it, to kind of putting it behind you. I won't say hanging up the sticks because he's not going to be hanging up the sticks.
No, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, in fact, he's probably going to be playing a lot. I won't say more, but you're going to be seeing him play a lot more.
Yeah, it's true.
The thing is, not only is this, I think, a good time for it because of some of the recent, maybe unfavored characteristics that he brings to the CDL, just as far as the consistency as a player when it comes to being able to keep up with the direction that the CDL is going and the new talent. But you got to think about how many other players are going to kind of follow in his footsteps here across not just maybe older pros in the CDL, but especially very talented challengers players that are not getting a crack to get into the CDL. Because Warzone is massive. He's already played in like 3 huge tournaments. Like he's already competing for hundreds, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Wouldn't you guess? Yeah, no, he's very good.
Disgusting. Like,
absolutely.
He's good.
So why not follow kind of in the footsteps of Tommy, where it's like, yo, you were obviously still very much so capable of still playing in the CWL at that time, CDL as well, with London and all that. But I mean, Warzone is Warzone, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So I'm really excited to see what he does, because that's content that I will for sure be watching.
I agree, dude. Yeah. Oh my word. He built a lot of my foundational like COD knowledge. Like back when he in the early, when he started uploading a ton, like during Ghosts and BO3 and AW, that time when he was uploading a lot, and even up into IW, all of his ERAD videos and stuff. I mean, App's definitely huge. I've always loved watching App. So excited to see what he can do in the future. It's going to be sick. So I'm really, really hoping he has a lot of success. I mean, based off of how some of the other good pros have been going, I think he will. And I'm excited to see what he can do, man. I'm really looking forward to it. So we'll have to see. Let's go, baby. Yeah. So the last few things here of the news, nothing like crazy shocking, but I mean, we're playing Where's Waldo out here. Shotzzy was spotted at the hex quarters in the background of a podcast, boys. Alert, where's the flags? It's almost as if Shotzzy and Optic and Dallas, they're merging. Who'd have thought? I mean, it's based further and further more confirmation that this is happening with Optic. And then Hitch confirmed that announcements are getting delayed because of legal stuff. So that's not really surprising either. That's kind of what I imagine everybody assumed with the contracts. And if you're merging two big brands like Optic and Envy in some sense, in any way of that, acquisitions or all that, that's going to take a minute. So that's not too surprising. I mean, shocker, the Optic thing's happening, and the announcement is probably coming sooner than later if they're already shooting the content for it and doing all that. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see.
Definitely.
Other Optic news. I mean, Formal was hinting at a little bit of that playing Halo. I threw this in here for you, Sam. I mean, this is solely for you. But Formal's hinting at, getting a squad for that first Halo event of the year in where's it? Is it in Raleigh, right?
It's in Raleigh.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out North Carolina, like big ups.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Damn, you want to see Formal play some Halo?
Oh, for sure. And I was talking with some guys too, but it's like this event, the Raleigh event that is happening a week after the game launches. If any event that like pros, former pros, whoever should go, it should be this one, because pretty much everyone's on the same playing field. It's literally like you could probably form a team, like Maniac could form a team and maybe win it.
Have a chance.
You know what I mean? Like there's gonna be no like crazy practice happening. It's just gonna happen. So I would love to see like Formal take some guys. I would love to see like.
Is it legal for COD pros to play in this?
That's the question. Is like, I know Playster was like kind of joking around too. It's like, could he play in it? I don't know.
Can Neptune play in it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's where the real question comes in. Because the thing was, Shotzzy and Frosty were running kill race tournaments during the last flight, and they were smoking everybody. So
it was insane. There was they'll post the stats of each flight, and Shotzzy was literally like the highest kills of the flight.
Dude.
That's crazy. Awesome. That's out of all players playing the flight beta, right? Or whatever. That's crazy. I mean, shocker. Shotzi's kind of good at video games. The last few things here, there was one that's kind of crazy. So DraftBuff, the fantasy Call of Duty app, announced that they're going to discontinue, which is sad.
I actually didn't know this.
We really enjoyed that last year. They partnered with the podcast, and they decided that they wanted to. They said they're going to be pursuing some other business ventures. So that's disappointing. I was really looking forward to doing some more stuff with them this year. We had a blast with the Listener League last year and all that. So that's disappointing. Hopefully we can see maybe some other companies come up and just try to make it work with Fantasy COD. I really think there could be something there. Mm-hmm. The only thing is right now the formats can get kind of weird with how Fantasy COD works. And all of that, but
I mean, I
don't know. Thoughts on Fantasy COD and DraftBuff and everything.
They had a great. I think they had a great user friendly format. Like that's the thing that sucks is, they really were like, they were there, and so like it would have been nice if maybe they like someone could have bought them out, something, but just to kind of have that go away was like, man, that like they made some great strides. And so I don't know. I do hope at some point, like you mentioned, there could be like a more like rock solid, like Call of Duty.
I agree.
Whatever. But I guess it's hard to make it, when they were startup, and I'm sure the costs were just too high. So
I was thinking about it. I'm like, how do you make Fantasy COD work? And like, I think step one is that you kind of have to figure out, you have to partner with the CDL directly. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to have the casters talking about Fantasy COD. You need to talk about how many fantasy points Shotzzy had in that match. Like, these types of things probably need to be on the broadcast for you to like really ever become mainstream, because that's how it works in NFL football and NFL fantasy, or really anything. It's like, yo, tonight, Kyler Murray had 46 fantasy points because he had 5 touchdowns. Like, holy crap, this is the biggest fantasy point performance of the whole week. Like those types of conversations. I think that type of stuff could help, develop fantasy Fantasy CoD. I mean, really, the only company that could probably make that happen is probably DraftKings if they partnered with the CDL, considering they were partnered with the Subliners, right, this year.
Well,
so that'd be
they got duct taped over in real time.
Things you hate to see. But, so maybe we could have something like that in the future, would be really, really cool. But I would love to see something like that. Because I love fantasy sports. And so it'd be great to have like a mainstay, something for Call of Duty.
Yeah.
But I'm ranting at this point, but we'll see. The last thing I wanted to throw in here in the news was I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Twitch leaks about like the salary or how much people have been making off like subscriptions and stuff. How do you feel about like that type of stuff getting leaked to the public?
I personally could care very little. I don't care. I don't care. Yeah. That's what I literally could not care less. Yeah. However, I was biting my tongue for a moment. You notice who's very high up on that list. TP.
Yeah.
TP's
all of that because of what he's done in Warzone. He doesn't even compete in tournaments anymore. He just streams.
He doesn't?
Well, I mean, he hasn't competed at any major ones, or if he has not, placed all that high. That's why I'm very excited about. I'm sure Apathy sat there, retired, and said, "I'll just play more Warzone." And then that leak drops, and he probably sits there saying, "I made the best choice ever."
That's
because that's so much money.
So I guess I didn't even explain what happened, I guess, for the viewers out there. But basically what happened was apparently some Twitch data got like mined or hacked or something on those lines where it got released to the public of like subscription payouts for Twitch streamers. Yeah. I don't think this includes like donations. This might include bits and
it had to be bits.
Bits.
Donations
and
don't go through.
Right, because donations go through PayPal. So this doesn't include donations, but bits and subs. And like TP was at 1.7 mil since 2019, August of 2019. So just over 2 years.
Insane.
That is insane. What?
Nuts.
And like
Scump at
946.
So here's another little fun fact as I'm looking through the full list, 1 to 34. He is the top Warzone player in that list.
Really?
Yes.
Holy, what?
Yeah. Well, Tfue and Nick Merckx are in there, but like, and like sense, Tim, but I'm talking like competitive focused Warzone players. I mean, Tfue, he competes every so often. Yeah, Nick doesn't really play in many huge tournaments anymore, but
or maybe like exclusively Call of Duty guys or whatever. But
right, yeah.
That's nuts. I mean, Scump's Scump would obviously be higher than Teep if he streamed on a consistent basis, but Teep just streams so much that it makes sense. But yeah, that's crazy. Shout out Merc, by the way. Congrats. That's big dubs.
Yep.
I mean, that's
insane. Yeah.
We can talk about more
awesome, man. You love seeing that.
Yeah, I love that. Love that.
With like the conversation though about like, how do you feel like Shift? I mean, it's like
Shift, start streaming.
We all know that,
bro. I can't even stream a static image in good quality,
dude.
bro.
Start streaming Warzone, dude. At this point, guys, we need a little. Let's just stop the pod right now and start streaming Warzone.
What are we doing out here?
Why are we?
Why is this not live?
What is happening? What am I doing? I mean, this is insane. Oh my goodness. Boys, live pods from here on out after seeing those numbers.
Here we go.
But well, boys, are you ready for this? Are you ready for the segment of segments?
I don't know, man.
All right. Well, with that said, I think we can move on to the meat of today's episode, which is every CDL team's biggest weakness heading into Vanguard and kind of talking about some of the things that nobody wants to talk about heading into Vanguard. So let's get into it, baby. We have a lot to talk about. Let's roll it.
Trash. Garbage.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we're talking about the weakest of the weakest links of all of these squads out here. And we're starting with the weakest team of them all. The Atlanta FaZe.
So bad, dude.
They're so bad. Worse. Oh my word. Weak links all over the board for these guys. So off the rip, is there any worry at all that you have for this team? What's the weakness, quote unquote, for Atlanta FaZe heading into Vanguard?
Complacency, but even like saying that, there's just no way. I mean, they want to be a dynasty, man.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was the only thing I could think of was just like, hey, maybe they take some, they take it easy for a little bit and then they maybe they lose a few games and then they're back to the way they were. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I'm looking through this roster trying to pick apart a weakness in the last 3 years from any of them. Can't do it. It's not there. There is not anything you can look at. I mean,
that's the thing.
The only weakness they have is that for some reason this game is all of their 4 worst games in COD history. That's the only way that they're not even remotely competitive.
Yeah, suddenly their weakness is like dolphin dives. Like what's there? Oh wait, there are no dolphin dives.
Yeah, it's literally it's Modern Warfare. Yeah, it's Modern Warfare movement.
I know that's what it's tough to say. Well, that was the thing. I made this week or like this weekend, but I was gone. But I made a video for this weekend. Kind of like the odds of each team to win champs in Vanguard. And like I was like, man, how high do I put FaZe? Like it felt wrong to have them like upwards of like 25, 30, but I'm like, I kind of wanted to put them like out of 100% chance for all teams, combined. Like, where would you have them if
all
you had
time?
To no, like for their chance to win champs this year. Like, what's their chance compared to the rest of the teams?
Yeah,
very high.
Although I will say, I don't mean to sneak into a tangent, but me at my old age, I forget things quickly. I do actually have something that very well could be a weakness for this team.
Okay, I want to hear it.
Drop it.
Capture the flag.
Ooh.
None of them outside of Arcides has ever on the professional level played that. I guess BZ did technically because he used in the open that year.
Yeah.
But okay,
that's a great answer.
It's a long shot. We're gonna figure it out, but who knows? Maybe they're the worst CTF team in the league. No, it's not gonna happen either because they've got Crowder as their coach, so that'll be fine.
Right. No, I'm with you. That would really be what it is. It's a change of some sort of meta, like along those lines, that would have to cost them like that. But like you took a sniper out of Simp's hands last year.
He was fine.
And he was fine. They were the best S&D. They were the second best S&D team, best S&D team at points. Like they were a top 3 S&D team on the year, undoubtedly. Like they have a BZ. It's hard to point out a weakness. I'm with you guys, but CTF would be the best one. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
For the potential you have to keep your eye on, at least at the beginning of the year, depending on what that third game mode ends up being. So that's great. So interestingly enough, then the Toronto Ultra, obviously, next up on our list here, we're going down the reverse order of the standings from last season's regular season. So Ultra up next. I mean, they're returning their full roster as well. There was rumors of Kleenex maybe trying to look for the bag somewhere else, but ended up coming back home. What comes to mind for this team?
I think it's a similar story. However, Ultra was never able to really crack FaZe.
FaZe is their weakness.
Exactly. So the only thing I could ever, kind of like hint at is if, they do keep seeing that number 2 number, they're constantly getting second.
I hate seeing number 2.
Yeah. Right. And so do they implode? Is there a potential breakdown of they're just frustrated and they try to form a team that can beat FaZe? That's the only thing I can think of. But if you're consistently the number 2, I guess you can try to get to better by switching out your roster. But even then, it's like there's no guarantee there. So
interesting. My first thought is like, okay, Bance was unbelievable this year. He was incredible, and he outperformed anyone's expectation. And Vanguard, new game. And so the question is, I think first off is, how does Bance translate to the new to the new game? Slaying upside, SMG duos. There are variables there. I think we're all just kind of assuming it's going to be the same old, but there are new variables on a new game. And all of these guys are new to the CDL. Like when it comes to they're all, Kleenex, Cammy, now their 3rd seasons as pros, like on mainstay pros. And then you've got obviously Insight's 2nd year now. And then Bance coming off of his best year in, since
ever
IW, Bo3, like, Can he repeat it? And so that would probably be the biggest question mark. Whether that's a weakness, it's definitely the biggest question mark.
I like that you went down the Bance route because that's where I was going to go as well.
Okay.
Because it wasn't the fact that he had a great year all year. He was the subject of major controversy when the whole Methods thing had come out. Why is Methods gone and not Bance? Mm-hmm. And during Modern Warfare, he did not have a couple of great stages in a row back then.
No, and people were asking why Classic and not Bance when they made the roster changes in the offseason.
Yep, absolutely. So I think that is definitely one of the subjects is what will Vance bring to the table immediately off the get-go, right? Because we've seen now 2 years in a row, he's been able to grow kind of like he almost has like the similar story of like Apathy. Not necessarily great at the beginning of the year, great by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think the other only thing that you can probably point out, I mean, because again, Vance has consistently shown he can hang, would be, is there sophomore syndrome from Insight? I think that's still like, again, saying that FaZe is going to be bad at CTF. That is a very big long shot reach, but
for sure.
That could be the other thing. So I know you guys were talking about that last week. Like, we have not seen enough out of Insight yet to give statistical confidence that he's going to be, you know, an A-list player or whatever it happens to be.
For sure. I mean, we've seen some unbelievable rookie performances in years past, and then the new game comes around, and then there has been a few guys in the past where it hasn't fully translated, where like not everything was the same, and there's at least those. It would be unfair of us not to at least acknowledge that that's a possible outcome of the range of outcomes for Toronto. Like they could undoubtedly be the mainstay second best team in the CDL all year long. Like that's very possible. But there's also worlds where it could go wrong. And I think it's pretty important to acknowledge those weaknesses. And then the other thing would be maybe like their, like, is there any tilt left or any confidence lost after some pretty devastating losses at the end of the year in grand finals, in stage 5 and then champs, where they had a lot of chances to win. So, I think all of us have a lot of faith in the team, but that's the whole point of the show is to kind of identify the biggest weaknesses and see what happens. So I'm with that for sure. So next up is, Dallas and Optic are the next two in the standings, which is ironic. So I guess we'll stick with the Dallas Optic team heading into Vanguard here. Assuming, all signs pointing to it being Shotzzy and then Illy and Scump and Dashy. I know we talked about this last time you were on the show, Shift. Is kind of some of the things that Optic had going on in their thoughts. Has any of your opinions changed now as we've seen a little bit more Vanguard?
They are exactly the same. I still am. I mean, any word that I use right now is going to come off with negative connotation, but I'm still apprehensive to get sold on the Shotzzy Scump conversation as the SMG duo, and also the Illy Dashy conversation. Because I think for both of those, notoriously, and maybe just generally speaking, you think of an Illy, you think of a Dashy as being in the AR duos that they had been a part of before. Neither of them have ran that more anchor style. Both of them have been more of that kind of flex style. In fact, you go back to Black Ops 4, both of them were Maddox players. If that doesn't sell you on it, that should. Shotzzy and Scump, I know everyone, when I last talked about it, was like, dude, what are you talking about? Scump's going to be getting so much more action now that Shotzzy's playing with them. We haven't seen that kind of Scump since what? AW, but anything before World War II?
You mean like on a consistent respawn basis?
Right. Yes, consistent respawn basis. Because you could have said the same thing about Scump and Envoy, and I think there were moments of that, but I still never felt like looking at Scump and Envoy from years previous was the same as looking at Shotzzy and Huke, for instance,
definitely.
So I don't know. I'm still not sold on what those duos are going to necessarily guarantee. I think is the best word I could use.
No, I mean, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I saw one post on a very spicy post on the Reddit talking about Dashy and looking back at some of his duo ARs and some of the lack of success that the other AR on the team that plays with Dashy has had. And I'm like, I mean, it's an interesting at least point to kind of say that you look at Formal last year or, in Modern Warfare, you're looking at Slasher not having the best year. And then you go back to BO4 and you're like, Crim, not the best year from Crim in BO4. So, I mean, there is a debate there. And whether or not Dashy is the best of team players in Respawn. But I mean, I don't think anyone doubts that you can definitely build a team around Dashy that can win though. With how good of a slayer he is in an AR role. And
I think just quickly, you talk about the history that Dashy has had with those other ARs. I don't think you look at what Illy has done and you have the most vote of confidence that he's going to be an electric, consistent standout, maybe main AR. I not to sell him short, but I mean, it's just one of those things that you don't look at him the same way you look at a Clayster.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
or
I don't know.
Crim or
Arcides or whoever.
Lines.
Insert in veteran pro here. Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think too with Illy is the main thing is people I think people agree on what Ilya could be. But like you said, like we have not seen this standout, like super reliable, amazing player yet out of Ilya. Like he's been there. He's been putting in the work. He's been a great teammate. But,
and in some big series, he's made some unbelievable maps and plays. And
can't take that away.
Obviously, in S&D All Modern Warfare, he was very, very good. And he had a lot of very good S&D moments this year, too. And then, like, again, the respawn, again, inconsistent at least. And then you pair that with Scumps. Though we highlight Scump and how good he was at Champs, I mean, for the most of the season, he wasn't a mainstay respawn player by any means. He was a very good S&D player on the whole season, but respawn was questionable. And so, you hope you compare it with Shotzzy and how reliable Shotzzy has been for basically his whole career. And even this year where he was sifting through SMGs with Hook and Illy, and then at the end of the year, of course, with Vivid, he was very, very good with really all three of them after the first stage. But I agree with all those question marks. And then we just talked about some of the communication there and the mentality of, Scump and Dashy paired with Illy and Shotzzy.
Yep.
It is a little bit harder to have faith in them as a whole when they're like a consistent performance basis versus like a New York when you have like Clay and Crim there, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too with like you basically have like two poster boys now, Scump and Shotzzy. It's like if anything happens, like who's the one to take the fall? Who's the one to go down? It'll be interesting.
I mean, if things do go wrong, does this fall into the world of like Chicago last year where it's just like, can you even make a change with the roster that you have? Like those are 4 unbelievable players based on the weight that their names at least hold. How do you make a change if things start to go wrong?
I don't know how you do. I don't know how you do. That's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, I still think that this team's locked and loaded. But like I said, I really like this S&D. This team in S&D should be literally disgusting. It just comes down to the response and what that plays. And then I think the game modes here is still an X factor for like Illy and Shotzzy learning potentially, like for Shotzzy, especially if you end up playing CTF, like how does Shotzzy play in CTF? Who knows? And if that ends up being the case, but
he's played a bunch of Halo, so I assume he understands CTF. That's true. Perfectly fine.
That's true. Very fair.
Juggle
very
that
fair.
flag, Shotzzy.
Oh yeah, hold that flag. But we'll see. I think it's a pretty fair argument overall, though, for Optic. So, okay, well, I guess we could pass on the NRG squad for now. A lot of weaknesses right there, right now. Looks like they have some gaping problems right now.
They do.
But all right, the New York Subliners is the next squad up here. Very interesting, obviously, with their roster, the assumed roster of Clay, Crim, Neptune, and of course Hydra. Thoughts on this team?
Neptune, question mark. I know, Josh, you specifically, you're all about Neptune. You're on the hype train for it.
I'm on the hype train, yeah.
I'm still not on it. I'm still not on it. I just never at any given moment in time walked away from a full stage and said, damn, Neptune made Florida a better team. I couldn't at no point for an entire stage say that. Certain weeks, sure, but for an entire stage, I never had that resounding feeling. So that's my big question.
The biggest problem with, I think, deciphering what happened with Florida is just like, well, that is the problem.
It's fair.
How do you decipher what happened with Florida? Was it Neptune? Was it Awakening? Was it a combination of all 4 of them? Was it the second SMG? Was it what was the real problem for Florida? And it's hard to decipher. And then, was it Neptune's problem? And then does that follow him to New York if it was his problem? Like, so there are all those question marks. But like, I have a lot of, what gets me hyped about Neptune is his S&D play for Florida was very good for a Halo guy coming over and like quickly making big time plays in Search and Destroy for that team. And like you could probably say that was maybe his best game mode on the year was S&D consistently throughout the year. And though he had some massive pop-off games, specifically like the Checkmate, Hardpoint, I think, and a few other like really, really nice respawn game modes or games. But that's why I get hyped about Neptune, but I can see the question marks there with what exactly will he be? And then how does he pair with Crim or with Clay?
Yep.
And the personalities there, it's hard to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there is that huge potential with Neptune. He's an incredible player. He's great at Halo. I hope it does at some point transition into Call of Duty. I don't know. But Yeah, we'll see. And then Hydra, you could call him like a question mark, but like really, there's just no way, right? It's one of those things where it's like
at this point,
it's
he's
one of those
at
like
least
long shot things, you know.
He gets to run a full on sub again this whole next year.
Yeah.
That's the other big key. He doesn't have to pick up an AR anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, there are major question marks with New York. It's more like, do you buy that Crim can be a mainstay, at least like B tier, A tier type flex for this team to enable Hydra and Neptune to be S tier, just disgusting SMGs around the map? And then can Clay and Crim do enough to enable this team to be elite? You know?
Yeah. I would say keep in mind that we're looking at 2 anchor-based ARs, main ARs in both Clay and Crim. Now, granted,
Crim has been a flex in his career.
Yeah, and
times.
Clay did use a lot of the Maddox and BO4 back in the day with the United as well.
Mm-hmm.
The question would be, is Clay still able to rock that play style going into this next year to kind of be that glue? Because I don't feel like we're going to get the same kind of meta that we had from last year, where there's only 2 weapons you can use. I feel like we're going to get more than that.
Well, we're at least going to have some more variations of at least 2 weapons, like what we saw with the M4 early on in Modern Warfare was the
no
fast
optic, no
M4
stock.
and the slow M4 and the variants. I think we'll see more of that this year, more than likely. But I mean, the other thing that we talked about in the pod at one point was like, you know, to be fair, we have all locked in our minds that Clay is a really, really, really great player. But, you know, if you look back at those last handful of games, he was not playing well for New York in those final few games before he took a break. And so, you know, is that fluky? Was that fluky? Was that a real deal? You know, those are all question marks too.
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning, you know, when we're talking about weaknesses and I do want to preface this, like, this is no like shade or anything, but I think it's fair to say that both Crim and Clay had some pretty mentally hard years last year.
Agreed.
And so like you could, you know, kind of wonder, hey, if the start of this year is not much better,
if things aren't going well,
do we see like retirements? Do we
ultra
see
tilt?
Ultra
Man,
tilting?
that's tough.
You know what I mean? So like, I do think there's that factor of maybe some like mental, mental health.
That's
maybe
actually
is there.
interesting.
So
yeah,
I don't know that could play into it, but I do see this team being well off the bat. I think, but that there is that potential there. So.
I agree. I think that's really fair to mention. So solid conversation overall there, I think. But next up is the Rokkr. Very interesting team because, I mean, like, I think everyone feels like solid about the Rokkr, but I would imagine the biggest question mark is the upside slaying on a consistent basis.
Great.
What does that look like in Respawn? And like, you're bringing in Loony, you anticipate this team's going to have the strats for S&D. They're going to be locked in. You got Major Maniac, Saints, and Loony all doing their little things around. I mean, they're going to be good in Search and Destroy. I don't know how you're not. With how good Standy looked too. The question mark is Respawn's third game mode. How does that play out? And can Major Maniac keep the mainstay Slang and Priesta?
Yeah, my main point was hardpoint, man. There was times where it just looked absolutely atrocious at the beginning there. I know, you know, pre-Standy, and then even like a little bit like post-Standy too. There were some times where just like, you know, what in the world's going on? But yeah, and you know, that's what you mentioned too with the Respawn is that has to get consistent. That has to be there for them if they want to, you know, consistently be top 2, top 3 there. So that was like my main bullet point for the Rokkr for sure.
I've got both pros and cons. I think the first is, again, if we're talking about Modern Warfare engine, keep in mind that you've got Priesta and Major Maniac that at the time were both a part of the Atlanta phase during Modern Warfare.
Yep.
Now, that said, Major Maniac's role in Respawn with the Atlanta phase was, all right, Mike, take the longest route you possibly can, secure spawns, and you're good to go. And you know, I had questions about Mike at the beginning of the year with this Minnesota team where it was, is he going to be too slow with going from 5v5 to 4v4 where he has to be an integral part of every rotation in the action? The answer was yes, he was playing too slow. Now, I think him getting dropped down to challengers was a huge wake up call, and he instantly tried to turn that around. I don't know how cognitive it was, but he started running a sub in challengers Maybe that was to force his play style to get a little bit faster.
That's what it was.
If so, that's 5 million IQ and he's the smartest man alive. If not, and it was just one of those things that he felt like he had something to prove and it kind of woke him up,
maybe
that's fine. That's fine too. I still have questions though. I think about that in particular, where it's, will Major Mania continue to be a little bit of a sloth on the map when it comes to respawn? Because I think you're right. Search and destroy wise, this team's going to be set, ready to go. But the respawn definitely provides a bit of a question, especially if CTF comes in the mix next year. You have to be active all the time. Not that you didn't with Control, but like, again, Control, you literally play defense half the time, so you don't have to move. Right. So, that's one of those things that I feel like could potentially be a problem. And then sophomore syndrome from Standy. But again, he was MVP, at least in my mind, when he played for Triumph and Modern Warfare. He was arguably up in the running for Rookie of the Year last year. I think he, like Insight and other rookies from this last year, are going to be just fine.
The real deal. I agree with you. Yeah. It really does come down to Major and how Mike ends up playing there. At this point, I have a lot of confidence they're going to be, and like I see no world where this team like implodes. Like they're not going to be awful. Like it just seems so unlikely that they're awful, but like, do they have that top 3? Can they get to that next gear on a consistent basis? Mm-hmm. It's just hard for me to see that, but I really hope that's the case. I mean,
and I would be curious. I'm high on this team, by the way. I know I'm coming off critically, but that's the whole point of the exercise here.
It is.
The thing is, let's say, for instance, that one of these players has a slow start and they're not able to even get towards top 3, let alone grand finals. How much patience does Minnesota have before maybe making a move to not give this team that same amount of time that they needed, obviously, this last year to get to the form that they were by the end of the year?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, we saw, obviously, they brought in Standy. They dropped down accuracy. They brought Major back in. Like, they made enough changes where it was a significant amount. And again, like I said, maybe it comes down to who they end up signing as their actual sub for this squad. But I'd be interested to see exactly how that ends up playing out. I wouldn't be surprised if we see at least some experimentation at some point throughout the season.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. But yeah, all right. So next team up on the board here is the LA Thieves. What's the worry for this team? What's the weakness on this squad?
I mean, I know there was some question marks too with how the SMGs are going to work, whether Draza or Kenny will be running the SMG. So.
Yeah, right now it's looking more like Kenny.
I'd have to assume that, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I think there's pros and cons for that. Draza was a phenomenal AR when he was playing it with Kenny. So
for sure,
he could be that like phenomenal second AR while Octane is that anchor AR, and then you have Kenny and Envoy. Duo SMG, and so I think that could be like the main question mark here is how the SMG duo is going to work. I think Octane is just going to be kind of that rock solid AR for them. I do have confidence.
Yeah, I mean naturally,
absolutely, especially, and I'm pretty confident we're gonna have land right away. I think.
Yeah,
so,
I think so.
mean that's a great step in for Octane. But then also too with Envoy, I don't think it was a secret that contrasting its performance from Modern Warfare to Black Ops Cold War, there was at times a stark difference. Now granted, there were snaps where he did go off, but he just wasn't that consistent, especially in S&D. He wasn't that like pop off, get
he didn't have a same texture I had to run around on.
Exactly, literally.
And then I know like he did like express frustrations with like, hey, like someone else make a call here. Like I don't want to be like all this on my shoulders. Yeah, that was one of those
interesting conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, maybe it was just his teammates relying too much on him. So then that could be all fixed up here in the Thieves. But yeah, I would just say I think that I'm looking at the SMGs here, where there's that question mark of, hey, they could either be like extremely dominant, but there could be also some growing pains with figuring out Envoy and Kenny.
I agree.
Or if for some reason Draza ends up being the SMG. So yeah,
I would love to see World War II Kenny back in form, man.
Bro,
I don't know if it's just like an old soul born in 1942 or what it happens to be, but I would love to see that again.
I mean, man. We could have literally London Docks Kenny back. I mean, that would be
that's true.
As just good as it gets, So
map, man.
Just an absolute menace.
This is like a way outside the lines thing, but Does anyone else maybe worry about how consistent they're going to be in search with a scope?
No,
when you look at like top overall search and destroy,
he'd probably be the sniper if that comes down to it.
That would be the expectation. But you know, when you look at like an Octane versus a Dashy versus a Simp, like that's I don't know. I would be very interested to see how this team does. I think just generally in search and destroy, not only because of some of the things you brought up about Envoy from Modern Warfare to Cold War, but I think also from sniping side. Because I know Draza can too, but like again, you don't list those people out and say, oh yeah, they're top 3 snipers in the game. Yeah,
that's true. I'm right with you guys. I think the hard point would be a hard point with the SMGs, and hard point specifically would be probably my biggest question mark, and what I would be looking at the most early in the year to see how that kind of sifts out inside of respawns. But I love all that. So up next, the Florida Mutineers. Obviously, we already talked a lot about them, so we don't have to hit them. We don't have to hit them too much harder. But what are you looking at as the biggest weakness heading into the start of the season?
Havoc.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the commotion on Twitter, from people that are floating around challengers, maybe others that aren't quite there. Is like, how is Havoc still in the league? Look, I'm actually a big Havoc fan personally.
Yeah.
But I think that is the first place that you look. I mean, you've even said at the top of this show, it's like, Florida said, and for now, Yeez as substitute.
Right.
If they're already talking about like we might be experimenting with what this starting 4 is going to look like already, you have to feel like last year, Havoc is going to be that first kind of, all right, microscope is down, heavily magnified on what he's doing.
I agree. I mean,
or Awakening as a sub. Awakening as a sub is something that I was never fully sold on. He handles it fine. Don't get me wrong. He's not a bad player with it, but again, when you compare it to a Shotzzy and a Simp and an Abizi, it's not a 1-for-1 there. And if you want to compete, you have to be at least 1-for-1 versus the top team in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think there's too much more to say. Like, it just comes down to, can Havoc be a very solid SMG? Because I mean, what we've seen is like, you need to have at least one like elite tier SMG on your team. And if you don't, it's not going to work. And so Florida was just missing that. They never had one. They never had Neptune or Havoc really ascend to that next level of SMG, and they couldn't really get them flowing on the map on a consistent basis. And that translated to them never really finding consistency inside of any game mode on the year. They looked good at different points in all of them, but could never pull it together.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much echo what you guys have said, what we said before too. It's just, Can they figure that out? Can Awakening show up on SMG? Maybe, but like you said, when you compare it to those top guys,
right? Would you be shocked though if Awakening comes out and it is just unbelievable? Like,
maybe
would it really be that surprising? Because I feel like that's very possible that he just comes out and is undeniably he's just undeniable on the map with an SMG in his hand and takes over.
Here's an outside conversation point. How interested are we in Willett as the coach?
Ooh.
When you compare people like Crowder and JCap and Marky B and Sender or Rambo, Saint Loony, and then you have Willett.
Definitely less experience.
Was at 1 champs in BO4? Coach Triumph last year, and they were disaster. They never broke into the top 8 during the stage qualifiers.
That's very interesting. Well, I know some people were a little bit surprised about that, getting them pulled in. So we'll have to see, man.
I'm a Willett fan, by the way. I'm just it's part of the exercise. I'm just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there.
I mean, I guess I really don't know how his. Every coach has a different kind of relationship with the players and how he's involved and how they want to be involved. But to your point, though, I mean, we've seen basically every elite team in a CDL has had a built out coaching staff with multiple coaches, and that's created a stability for the teams throughout the year. And like we talked about a lot on the show, that our cities has undoubtedly, he has thrown so much praise to their coaching staff throughout his interviews and all of that, multiple times emphasizing we would not have won champs without all of them with us here. So I think there is undoubtedly this a value that coaching staffs bring. and is probably still underappreciated overall for how good some of these guys are and how important they are to the teams. And so that is, I think, a worthy question to bring up is like the full-on coaching staff and the lack of like a built-out, like how many guys are really going to be contributing there for the Mutineers. It is an interesting question for sure. So I like it a lot. So our last 4 teams here. Surge, you're up. This is a really, really interesting squad. I mean, you've got the
a lot of question marks.
You got any of the players could potentially be the question mark. Accuracy at main AR, Sib, Mac, main SMGs, Pred and Mac on main SMGs, and then Sib as their Slayer flex. Who comes across to you as the biggest question mark out of like all of the potential buffet of question marks we got here? This is like golden corral of question marks.
I'm gonna write mine down because I don't want to look like a bandwagoner, but I'm really curious to what you guys have to say first.
Oh, I love it. Okay, Sam, do you have yours off the top?
I mean, it could be crazy to say. I don't know, but like when you talk about question marks, I don't know. I kind of think Mac is the question mark here.
Interesting.
I know Sib and Pred are the low hanging fruits here, but even with them, I still think Mac is still the question mark. Like we talked about, there's just times when I don't want to say unimpressed, but like, there's times on the map where he didn't look comfortable. I don't know. So with like having Mac be like a question mark with 2 AMs, right? That's scary. And then on top, and then on top of that, accuracy is I'm not the most excited about him as a main AR with the past 2 years. However, World War II, he was amazing. So like he could come back with that, but I don't know. Maybe that's a hot take to say Mac is the real question mark here.
Well, that's actually interesting. I mean, like I said, any of them could be. You could literally make any of them be the question mark, and like that's why the range of outcomes for this team is if everything hit, they could be top 4. If they don't, this could be the worst team in the CDL. It's that crazy at this point.
Yeah. I want to know what Shift has to say.
I'll let Shift go last. So,
Yeah.
So if every team's goal is to win COD champs, all right, what we've seen is you need multiple top 10. You need at least one top 10 SMG, and then you need to have one of your other 3 guys be like that top 10 type player to have a chance to win champs. And at this point, I think my biggest question mark for if that guy can get there, and generally you need an unbelievably consistent main AR to be a top 4 team in the CDL. And so I think my biggest question mark would be, can accuracy be a top 4 SMG or AR in the CDL to really elevate them to have a chance to compete for a championship? Like that would probably be my biggest question mark when it comes to like, can they win champs or can they be that level to compete for champs? And that's why I'm not sold that he can be at this point in his career now. But I mean, we saw in World War II where he was one of the best players in the CDL, but that was the slowest game we're probably ever going to have in COD for probably ever from here on out. So when we haven't seen, I mean, accuracy got benched last year. He was a fine player. I'd say you can be a competitive team with accuracy, but if you're trying to win COD champs, I just don't know if he can get to the level that you need an AR to get to.
Even in Modern Warfare too, he didn't really instill any confidence.
He was fine.
Yeah,
he was fine. And like, then that was the thing is like, New York never got to that point in Modern Warfare where he could be that good. So we'll see that. If the line is, can Seattle be an okay team? Then accuracy is definitely not the biggest question mark. So I was kind of seeing it. Can Seattle win COD champs? For that was my perspective there. So Shift, knock us out. What do you got? Pred. I love it.
We've seen 3 Australian players, 4, I'm going to count. Yeah. 4 Australian players that have come over, and none of them have lived up to the expectations after immediately coming off of their APAC season.
True.
Maybe the closest we've had so far would probably be Luca. But even that was like, we barely saw him in BO4, and then we saw him running essentially an AR in Modern Warfare, which,
and he might have been one of the slowest players. I mean, he was one of the slowest players in the CDL.
Yep. I'm Not sure. The thing is, like, Pred doesn't even have much international experience, let alone top tier competitive experience because of the fact that it's been COVID. I mean, even LAN in Australia is like, oh, you know, fine. This last year,
the kickoff event, right? Top 6.
He played at the kickoff with the Renegades team that year.
Oh, Renegades.
They were still Renegades at that point. But you know, outside of that, so what? Like, Mac was also at that event. He finished second. So, you know, that's to be determined as far as how much actually can he do. Because, you know, there's a lot of thoughts on Pred. I think during Modern Warfare, he really kind of took over a lot of the conversation because he was a flashy, go rogue, go 4 straight kills in a row type SMG player. This last year, there were some moments where he really struggled. And I will say he's coming into the league as a much more mature player than he was at Modern Warfare. He's doing a lot more in and around the objective. But that's versus Australian players. And there were still times where he was struggling hard. So if he gets into a rut against players like Simp and Abeezy and Shotzzy and, you know, whoever else you want to list that's your top favorite SMG player of all time, if he's just getting bodied in the 1v1s, what does that do to Seattle's ability to actually even move on the map? Because I think you're right. You can look at it. There's really there's 2 biases of frames because I think they're both good points. You can't win championships without a good main AR that knows exactly how to be watching and how to actually open up space and things like that. At the same rate, if your subs aren't finding kills, and let's just say
it doesn't matter how good your main AR is.
If you're in a 4v2 and both of your subs run up and die, your ARs can't do shit. So I'm really interested to see what Pred has to bring to the table. I think Sib's going to be the rock star of this team, no problem.
Definitely.
Whatsoever.
A slaying flex, right? I mean, he's locked and loaded.
I think Mac will bring consistency, whether it's a little bit better than where he has been or a little bit worse maybe than where he's been in. Either way, he's going to be consistent. I think he's going to be more than okay. My biggest question would then be between, can accuracy still rock that main AR and do it at a well level? I think he's got some freedom because you've got Sib with you who can pick up a little bit of your slack if you are having a bad game. Yeah. But up front, Fred and Mac, if these maps are going to be what we think they're going to be, you've got to win your ones on rotation and respawn, and especially on entry in search. And I think Pred's going to be the guy that they're going to look at to do that. And if he starts to struggle, I think the Seattle team continues to be bottom 4.
Well, yeah. So this was one thing that we talked about. I think when they announced their roster, we asked like, how long, and I want to hear your opinion on this. How long would you be willing to give this team if, let's say, they're a bottom 4 team for the start at the beginning of the season? Sure. How long would you give this team before you'd want to make a roster change?
2
obviously,
stages.
2 stages. Okay, interesting. Because I mean, obviously, you'd assume this team is going to get off to at least a slower start than some of these other teams, considering how young they are. And at least it's not shocking if they do start off slow, at least. So
they could respawns though. This team may just destroy people and respawn early on.
That's possible.
I think Surge is going to be the biggest problem for this team.
Yeah, I mean that would be on par with the Surge in the past 2 seasons.
With imagine 3 years in a row.
Players.
Oh man,
I know. It's tough to say, but no, yeah, okay. It's 2 stages. I think all of us are kind of on that like maybe 2, maybe 3 stages line somewhere in there.
Because 2 stages is like 6 months of the game. So
well, that's true. Yeah. So giving them a lot of time. Yeah. I mean, after the game comes out in November. So
yeah,
that makes sense. So our last few teams here. Thoughts on the London Royal Ravens. All right. So this is obviously the Afro, Nasty, Gizmo, Zero rumored roster. Not officially announced yet. But with assuming that that's going to be the team, at this point, we have no other news that's not going to be the case. So assuming that's the squad, what would you think is the biggest weakness for this team?
I think the biggest elephant in the room is Zero. You know, you've got questions there. I mean, when he did play, you know, I think he's a phenomenal
very
player.
Solid. Yeah.
Very solid. However, not playing for a year, coming back in with the top 48 players.
We saw that one with Alex.
That's another thing. So I'm going to say the biggest thing or the biggest hurdle is going to be that Zero gets back into his consistency.
I will go to bat for Zero for 6 pitches. Nothing but top 8 finishes since the 3rd Open and Challengers in Europe. However, all of those were 8th, except for 1 2nd place and 1 6th place, including dead last in stage 4 and then not making it into stage 5. That said, as much as I would point at Zero being the problem, you've got players like Vortex and Harry that very well can just sub right in. They'll be fine. I think this is going to be a top 6 team this next year. If the rumored roster holds, I think this is a top 6 team next.
Really?
Yeah. But
assuming that they make changes if it doesn't work off the rip.
Yes. Assuming that Zero let's just say that he's the first person to target, I think, when it comes down to if there were to be a vulnerability, I would believe that he would be the first one to showcase that. And if that's the case, I don't think London will wait long to pick up any of those other European talents that are familiar with Afro, Nasty, and Gizmo, of which would be a Vortex or it would be a Harry.
Line of folks waiting to get on that team who have played with, and probably a line of folks that those guys would go to bat for to put on the squad that they believe in. So, and
I know Vortex is coming off like more sub style player, but both Gizmo and Nasty have flexed in the last 2 years to ARs. So if they needed to, exactly. So I think this is gonna be a top 6 team next year.
Well, I mean, we've seen, we talked a lot about on the pod, but I mean, like we've seen the upside from Afro and like some of the ability that he's nuts. Had. Yeah, I mean, he's shown all the flashes of what you'd want to see from a potential top 10 type of potential player. And Nasty's he did everything that he could, everything that was asked of Nasty with what he was given opportunity wise during Cold War, he did. I mean, he looked great. He just didn't have the chance to join a squad. Yep. And so like hopefully that translates well at the beginning of this game, and he could easily have a story of exactly what happened with Afro. I mean, the exact same thing. So teams have been looking at Nasty for a while now too. So like, that's the thing. Like at this point, everything's lined up for this team to be good. I mean, like Gizmo, I think everyone's kind of assuming he's just going to be solid. I mean, I haven't watched enough of Gizmo to sit here and say either way. I really just can't sit here and cap. Like I've been studying Gizmo's film. But everything that I've seen from Gizmo from like European challengers, finals and things on those lines, he's looked very, very nice. So,
and the thing is with players like Gizmo and Nasty, they pick up games super quick. So this London team has a lot of potential to be very good early. And the other, like if you were to pick a downside out of Gizmo and Nasty, it's the fact that like when roster moves happen, they take a while, like especially Gizmo's case, like after that House Tarth team broke up, there were a couple of struggle weeks in the middle of stage 2, stage 3. That's
actually really interesting
in that point. But then the last through stage 4 going into finals, he didn't miss a grand finals appearance except for one time with that Orgless roster. Everything was either first or second for 7 straight events. Like they're nasty. They're unbelievable. So yeah, I think the problem would be that 4th man, because I don't think Afro's going to go anywhere. He's going to be the franchise poster boy. I think Nasty will very quickly become right there with him. Gizmo's going to be fine. And then if if Zero has problems, pull in Harry, pull in Vortex, you'll be fine.
Yeah, not the
top 16. I love it. All year long too, not by the end. They're going to be an all year top 16.
I love it. I love the fire. Things you love to see. So the last 2 teams, we got LAG off the rip, and boy, oh boy, their roster does not look like an 11th place team right now.
No, it does not.
I mean, my goodness. Obviously now they've got Thanos himself. They've got Slasher. They got Gunless. They got Hook. They got Asem. A squad that could easily make some plays this year. But what jumps off the page to you is their potential biggest weakness?
I think for me, looking at it, you're looking at Slasher for your main anchor, right? I think he's gonna perform just fine. I think we saw it when the switch to LAN or when we got to LAN, by the end of the year, Slasher was performing as we would have thought.
Yeah,
Gunless, I feel like what you're gonna get with Gunless. Maybe there's question marks here of can he become this like top 3-4 player that he was in Black Ops 4, or will there be some struggle? But I think what I'm looking at here is for sure Asem and Hook. Asem he's definitely an interesting case here. I think his place on New York was like a great spot for him to be in.
Right, he fit perfectly.
He fit perfectly in there. He was struggling with Modern Warfare, kind of like his role. And then he found a good role on New York. So like now the question is, can he transition to this LAG squad and kind of fill that role fine as well? And then Hook, we know Hook had a very rocky year last year, just ups and downs. Can't
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
I mean,
how much of that is personality versus performance, though?
Exactly. So I think Hook is going to be just fine. I think he'll be a star here. But so I guess really what it comes down to is going to be that ASIM is going to be his sub duo. So I think ASIM can do it. I really do. I think this team will be pretty disgusting, honestly. But there's still a question mark. People weren't looking at ASIM very heavily at the beginning of Cold War at all. And then he kind of found his role. He started making some waves, and then we saw how New York ended up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. For me, it's like maybe he will, maybe he won't. Show out. That's kind of my feelings on the matter at the moment.
That's fair.
I think Asim showcased a lot of maturity last year.
I agree.
And solidified himself as being a mainstay CDL player. Because coming off the Minnesota year Modern Warfare, I mean, there were questions.
There was
like,
real
dude,
questions.
Is he going to cut it? Like, I know FaZe Black and all that, his upcoming, it was like, dude, it seems the next big thing, all that. And then he got into the league, and like Black Ops 4 was fine. And Modern Warfare was like, bro, what is going on with really that SMG front line? I thought last year he really proved himself. My question mark is on somebody who's been there for a long time and has not had a lot of consistency in the last couple of years, and that's Gunless.
Okay.
I think just the last time I felt great about Gunless was LGBO4. The last time that I felt really, really good about him. So that's where I'm kind of pointed to.
Interesting.
For, those marked reasons.
I mean, like, I feel like when I think of Gunless, I think of a pretty overall reliable player, but he hasn't been like the superstar that he was. Maybe
hey, so we need to win a championship.
No, I agree. I agree with that for sure. But I do think that like there is like, okay, how does ASIM's play style evolve for a new roster where like it didn't really feel like ASIM was that much different of a player from Modern Warfare to Cold War in the sense of his play style or like his aggressiveness, but like it just fit better with Hydra and having Clay there to rein him in. So as long as Slasher and Gunless can give him the communication and keep him around the map where he needs to be, I think that's a big part of it too. Is giving him that communication, what he needs there, and that helps him a lot. But can he mold his play style enough to fit this squad and play with Hook? Who, I mean, obviously Hook with another really fast player in shots, he struggled to figure it out this season in 4v4.
I think for Asim as well, is how much trust is Slasher going to give him off the get-go? Because one of the things when Clayster was off for his break, who was it, the one that we heard in all of the COD comms that was stepping up? It was Asim. So I am hot on what he brings to the table. I think it's just down to what is the conversation going to be from Slasher? Because he's going to be the guy that wants to kind of direct this squad. And then obviously behind that, what are you going to get from Bevels and Ricky as far as that kind of trust is guaranteed? But if they sit there and say, look, like we want you to kind of be that secondary voice, I think that he's going to take that and put that cap on just fine and run that role as kind of that secondary guy and direct flow of traffic when things get chaotic, just like he did with New York. And that New York team wasn't even bad when Clayster was off. Like they were still fine. They're still competitive. So I'm pretty high on it.
This team feels like it needs to get off to a hot start, because like if it doesn't, then suddenly you have like Slasher and Gunless starting to get a little frustrated, and then ASIM and Hook try to start forcing some things. They're trying to, I mean, they're playmakers. They're guys that want to make plays around the map. And then you start trying, maybe they start going a little rogue, and then that that only pisses off Slasher and Gunless more. And then like I can see how there's like a narrative where this thing snowballs out of control real quick if they get off to a slow start. So I think it's just crucial that they show some flashes of brilliance early and the potential that they have as a squad, because I really think it's there. But the things have to click pretty early for them. So hopefully it does. And so we'll see. I love that a lot. So last team here is the Paris Legion.
What do we say?
Bro,
there's a lot to say about the Paris Legion. About the Paris Legion. They've got, again, in a very similar fashion to the NRG squad, a few gaping holes on this roster right now.
Just a few.
Guys, do you want to go play for the Paris Legion? I think we might have an offer on the table. So sign our and if that was the case, there'd be no weaknesses. So I mean, I don't
zero
know what
weaknesses.
Yeah, zero. I mean, goodness, it would be insane. Obviously, Paris does not have a squad yet out there. So that's what we're waiting on to see for old Paris. But
you guys know this? They didn't sign a roster last year until the end of December.
Yeah, I mean, and we very well might be in for the exact same thing this time around. Rodeo number 2.
If they don't pick up like a full challengers team at this point, just chalk it, bro.
I know. How do you not?
Pick up Vivid and 3 friends he likes from challengers that play together, and there you go. You got a team, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. Literal facts.
Are they still going with like, we want 4 French players that can compete for a championship, please? Because
I mean, at this point,
that was memes.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, why not, right? Well,
the good news, Josh, is you could still have the "What's Happening with Paris" segment.
Literally, what is freaking wrong with Paris?
We need to bring that back now.
It's insane. It's insane. But boys and girls, I think that lets us get into our intelligent or irrelevant portion of the show, boys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's go.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
All right, Sammy, kick us off. What's up? Intelligent or irrelevant? What do you got for us today?
All right, so kind of on the weaknesses kind of topic here. The question is, which of these 4 teams is most likely to be the first to make a roster change next season?
Interesting. Okay.
So we've got LAG, we've got Surge, we've got Mutineers, and then Rokkr. Just kind of throw that one in there.
Right, you gotta have the 4th in there.
Yeah. So my initial thoughts is, I'm assuming people are going to say Surge, just with the kind of
the news and the news today. Like,
oh wait, Surge?
Oh,
Florida?
Florida.
I meant Florida, I think.
Yeah.
Florida.
Did you? Because if you assume Surge, I'm curious on to why.
I meant Florida. I do apologize.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're forgiven.
There's times where I see the little, in fact, I'm like slightly colorblind. So it's like, I see like the blue.
That is a fun fact.
Okay.
I don't know. Kind of bunks up with me. I'll just say, okay. So I
agree with you. I think they say Florida because of the recency bias of like the news recently, and like it's fresh on their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And like there was a lot of negativity, I feel like, overall. So I'd imagine they say Florida.
So then what about second?
I mean, wait, Schiff, who do you think the people are going to say?
Florida. I mean,
who would you say?
I would say Florida. I think it's largely because of the fact that you've got a very talented player already confirmed as your 5th. And it seems like you're already kind of keeping it open to who actually is the starting for. It kind of feels like everyone's fighting for a starting job except for Skies. So there's that to kind of consider in a way, I think, largely. And I think for most people, that, not to downplay the community, but if you don't know Dave, you're probably sitting there saying he's starting already, like things like that. And wait, if now you learn, Dave's an AR player, what about Wake? Like, I think there's generally that would put people onto Florida.
Sure.
And I think just because they've got a fluid 5th, it really could be a fluid roster to start off the year.
I agree. I mean, like, maybe if the question was after the start of stage 1, who's the most likely to make a roster change, then maybe it's
Florida.
Seattle.
After stage 1?
Like after the second stage 1 starts. Because like Florida could make a roster change before the start of stage 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
So if that makes sense. So I could see it being Seattle then at that point if you take it from there. But
cool.
What do people have to say, Sam?
Yep. So I'm voting for Rokkr here.
Yep.
And wow, a resounding 68.8% say Mutineers.
Oh wow. Okay. So it's the folks. They're out there, baby.
They are.
Yeah.
21% say Surge. And then split 5% with LAG and Rokkr. So
okay, interesting.
Probably,
are there any comments?
Intelligent. So all the comments
I would say
are
intelligent.
Yeah, all the comments, just forewarning, are all about Florida. So
okay, that's fair.
Our man Desma says they got Yeez primed and ready. Yeah,
true.
Yep.
Yeez is really freaking nasty. He's so good, dude.
Yeah, man.
Hughes says Yeez for Havoc is inevitable. So Florida, Rokkr are going to be like Optic Chicago of this year, in my opinion, with no changes too. Okay. Interesting. Zoom Viper says, as a Mutineers fan and part of the Big Wake fan club, it pains me to say, but it has to be us. Wake will be nasty like Modern Warfare. However, there are better subs available than Havoc, who seems like a weak link. And even though Dave Patey is unbelievably nasty, if it's a 3 sub meta, it's chalked.
That's that's actually a super fair point we didn't even bring up.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
Other teams are so much more better ready to go for a 3-sub meta than Florida is.
True.
Yeah. That's the best point probably.
And then last year,
good comment there.
Crispy CP. Where's
legend.
LA Thieves at? Fair. But in all seriousness, with the numbers of bench players on Mutineers for the season, one bad showing can mean the end for that iteration of Florida. I'm curious to see if they can make it work.
Now, I would be interested if we were to throw out the first team to pick up somebody that isn't already listed on a roster. Like, because Florida, that's a fluid roster.
Yeah.
But if like Florida was not part of the conversation, or even if they were, when it comes to dropping somebody and picking somebody new up,
for sure.
If you said changes to their full roster from top to bottom, that would be interesting.
Yeah, if the question was which team will make the most roster changes this season, that could be also an interesting question.
The most roster changes, I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle's in that picture again.
That's very possible. Yeah. Because you're bringing in the guys to kind of make that happen too, and it seems, but at the same time, based off last season with how unwilling they were to make changes, maybe that was because of the salaries of the guys they had on that team with Gunless and Octane.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually interesting. I do think that Rokkr are also very possible to pick up a new guy to maybe make that roster change for the high upside plays, but all those are possible, but love all of that. So there it is, boys. That is the pod. That is our first substitute co-host finale. What a time to be alive here.
How does it feel? How does it feel to be our only guest, then also our only our substitute co-host?
Our only substitute co-host.
95 episodes in. This is the time to be alive here. At this point, it's just a meme.
The real question that I think the people want to know is, when is the Bo3 merch dropping?
Oh, now we're talking, okay?
These are the real questions.
I can get behind this, all right? Now, this is the conversations I'm here for.
Should we drop a green sweatshirt?
Just for the start of, for the 100th episode. We have 5 weeks to make this happen.
100th episode, drop the Bo3 Speedo. That's what the people really want.
Rex is rocking that thing.
That's our only merch too, is just a Speedo.
It's just that. It is just that. You want to rep Bo3?
We're dropping our
Prove
merch.
it.
There seems to be only a Speedo here. Yeah.
Intentional.
I love it. I love it.
That'd be great.
Well, we might have some conversations, once we turn off this podcast. But boys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you guys did, drop that comment down below. We want to hear what you guys' thoughts are. What are your guys' thoughts on the biggest weaknesses of the teams in the CDL? Drop all your news down, or all your thoughts on the news down below, and everything else. We always love seeing those comments. Those 5-star reviews always help out the pod a lot too. And you can follow us on Twitter. SalvationsElite, _Bo3, and of course, IHOLDSHIFT everywhere, always and everywhere on all social medias. And perfectly average golf,
Perfectly average golf.
Yeah, shout out. So, boys, again, like, comment, subscribe, share if you guys really enjoyed it. And as always, guys, I'm Josh. That's Sam. _Bo3 Sam. And to our partners right for you is IHOLDSHIFT, guys. We will see you next time. We out.